She was on my porch, waving her phone in the air like she owned the place. "Officer, come quick, this man broke into my property." Her voice cut through the quiet street, shrill enough that blinds shifted in neighboring windows. For a second I just stood there, my travel bag still in hand, dust from the road clinging to my boots. I had come back a week earlier than planned, tired, hopeful to sleep in my own bed again. Instead, I found her, Karen, standing like a queen in front of my door, and behind her, a teenage boy lounging against the frame with a soda can in his hand, wearing my t-shirt. My t-shirt. It didn't register at first. My mind froze, trying to piece together what I was seeing. The kid grinned, tilted his head back, and said, "Mom, don't worry, I'll handle him." That laugh, it sliced through me, smug and careless, like this was some sort of joke. But it wasn't a joke. From where I stood, I could see the inside of my house. Blankets tossed across the couch, pizza boxes stacked on my coffee table, my TV remote discarded on the floor. My home looked like a frat house. I clenched my jaw. "Excuse me." My voice came out slower than I expected, low, strained, because my pulse was already pounding. Karen puffed her chest and stepped closer, lowering her voice like she was delivering a secret. "This neighborhood has rules. You abandoned your property. My son needed a place. We're doing you a favor." Her words hit me like a punch. Doing me a favor, my throat tightened, but I forced the words out. "This is my home. I live here. Get out." She smiled wider, like she'd been waiting for me to say that, and then the sound. A faint siren in the distance, growing louder. My stomach dropped. She had actually called the cops. For the first time since stepping onto that porch, I realized this wasn't going to be a conversation. This was war. The squad car rolled up fast, gravel crunching under the tires. Karen straightened her back, lifted her chin like royalty awaiting her guards. "Officers, that's him. Arrest this trespasser," she shrieked, pointing at me again like a villain in a cheap play. The younger cop looked between us, clearly confused. "Ma'am, are you saying this is your house?" "Yes," Karen snapped, voice trembling with fake outrage. "We have HOA authority here. He abandoned it. My son is the rightful tenant now." I almost laughed at how insane it sounded, but I knew better. I bit my tongue, set my bag down slowly on the porch, and steadied my breath. "Officer," I said, calm but sharp, "before you touch those cuffs, maybe you should check the deed. My name's on it, always has been." Karen's eyes narrowed. "He's lying, don't listen to him, he doesn't belong here." The older officer, seasoned enough to sense something off, studied me carefully. "You got proof." I reached into my backpack, pulled out a folded document I never traveled without, and held it out. "This is my land, my house, my name is right there." Karen's face twisted. "Paperwork can be faked, don't be fooled, this man is dangerous." The younger cop shifted, one hand already brushing against his cuffs like he might actually move forward. My fists clenched, but I didn't step back. I couldn't, not here, not now. And then something Karen didn't know. Another siren, louder, closer. This time it wasn't the cops she had expected. A second cruiser slid in behind the first, stopping hard. The door swung open before the engine even cut off. Out stepped a woman in full uniform, badge catching the last of the afternoon light. Her expression was sharp as steel, her stride unwavering. Karen's smirk faltered. "Wait, what?" she stammered. The woman adjusted her cap, her eyes locking straight onto Karen. "What's going on here?" Her voice carried the kind of weight that made even the younger cop straighten like a rookie. I didn't say a word, I didn't have to, because the woman standing there, radiating authority, wasn't just another officer, she was my wife. And in that moment I almost pitied Karen, almost. Because she had no idea the storm she had just invited onto my porch. Her smirk cracked the instant my wife's boots hit the pavement. The officers shifted, suddenly aware of a presence heavier than their own authority. Karen's hand faltered in midair, still pointing at me, her confidence leaking like air from a balloon. "That man broke into my property," she tried again, louder, as if volume could save her story. "Arrest him now." My wife's gaze flicked to me for a brief second, then she looked back at Karen with eyes like sharpened glass. "Funny," she said, voice calm but cutting, "because I know for a fact this is my husband's property." The soda can slipped in slow motion from the boy's hand, fizz spraying across my porch. He froze, face pale, shoulders stiff, suddenly aware that the game was unraveling. "Mom," he whispered, almost too soft to hear, "what's happening?" Karen snapped at him, her voice shaking for the first time. "Don't you say a word, I've got this." But she didn't have it, not anymore. My wife took one deliberate step closer, boots grinding against gravel, the sound louder than it should have been, impersonating HOA authority, moving into someone else's home, filing a false police report. Her words weren't guesses, they were charges, each syllable cut deeper. Do you have any idea how serious those charges are? The younger officer swallowed, glanced at his partner. The older one frowned, jaw tight. They both realized the trap they had walked into. Karen tried to salvage the moment, her voice climbing into desperation. No, you don't understand. I was protecting the neighborhood. This man abandoned his house. I folded my arms, staring at her son. He couldn't look at me, not anymore. Shame had settled heavy on his shoulders. The air was thick, the kind that made neighbors linger behind their blinds, waiting for the bang of fireworks but too scared to step outside. Even the lake behind us seemed to hush, waves lapping faintly as if waiting for the verdict. Karen puffed herself back up, clutching her son's arm like he was her shield. I'm on the HOA board, she snapped. I have rights. Her son pulled away, embarrassed, eyes darting to the ground. For the first time, he didn't look like he believed her. The older officer shook his head slowly. Ma'am, HOA doesn't give you the right to seize someone's home, that's trespassing. No, Karen barked, voice shrill, rising like it could smother reason. You don't get it, he abandoned it, we had the right. My wife stepped closer again, every word a nail in the coffin. Actually, it's more than trespassing. You filed a false report, you moved your son in without consent, you impersonated legal authority. She paused, then pulled a body cam from her vest. With a click, it lit up, recording. And everything you've said since I arrived is on tape. The soda can rolled off the porch step, fizz hissing against the stone. The boy whispered, Mom, you didn't say it was, like illegal. Karen whipped her head toward him. Shut up, but her voice cracked, and for the first time the mask slipped. Panic showed. I let a small smile curl at the edge of my mouth. You wanted me in handcuffs, Karen, now look who's in the spotlight. The younger officer cleared his throat awkwardly, tugged at his collar. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step aside. Her eyes darted wide and frantic. No, you don't get it. If this gets out, I'll lose everything. The HOA will. Enough, my wife cut in, her tone final like a gavel. You don't get to dictate the law here, not anymore. For the first time, Karen shrank. Shoulders hunched, bravado drained, her son inching away like he already knew the fallout would be ugly. But deep down, I knew she wasn't finished. People like Karen never surrendered quietly. Her hand trembled as she dug into her oversized purse, pulling out a folded paper like it was her last weapon. You think you've won? She shouted, waving it in the air. Look at this. The officers hesitated, then leaned in as she shoved it forward. This is an official HOA eviction notice. It says right here he abandoned the property, that means it's mine now. The younger cop squinted at the paper, uncertainty creeping back into his face. Is that real? Before he could reach, my wife snatched the sheet from Karen's hand. Her eyes scanned it once, twice, then a slow, dangerous smile curved her lips. Nice try, she said, holding it up for everyone. But this isn't an eviction notice, it's a template, downloaded off the internet, you didn't even change the watermark. The bottom corner was clear as daylight, sample form not for legal use. The older officer groaned under his breath. Karen's son muttered, face hot with shame, oh my God, Mom. Her face went pale, but she snapped back louder, angrier, clinging to whatever scraps she could. It doesn't matter, the neighbors support me, they all want him gone, we don't want strangers here ruining our community. Her words hit harder than I expected. They weren't just about the house, they were about me, about who I was, what I represented. My blood burned hot, but I stayed silent. My wife didn't, she stepped forward, her voice like steel. Strangers, you mean the man who owns this land? The man who fought for this country while you sat on a committee arguing about mailbox colors. The younger officer's eyes shot back to me, new weight in his voice. Sir, military. I nodded once. Retired, I bled for this flag so people like her couldn't steal what doesn't belong to them. The words hung in the air, heavier than the silence that followed. And in that silence, Karen's power crumbled, her fake authority shriveled into something pathetic. But even then, I saw it in her eyes. She wasn't leaving without one last swing. Karen's face twisted into something feral, her hands trembling as if she could claw her way back into control. And then she did something so reckless it silenced even the cops. She lunged forward, yanking the body cam right out of my wife's hand. This never happened, she screamed, throwing it down hard against the pavement. Gasps erupted, the officers stiffened, the boy's mouth dropped open. The body cam clattered, bounced once, then landed still. For a moment, everyone froze, waiting to hear the telltale crack of shattered plastic. But it didn't break. My wife bent down, calm as stone, and picked it up. She brushed the dust off with one swipe, clipped it back onto her vest, and straightened to her full height. "That," she said, voice low but sharp enough to cut glass, "was your last mistake." Karen's son stumbled backward, his voice cracking. "Mom, stop, you're making it worse." But Karen wasn't listening. Her eyes darted wild, searching for any angle, any opening. "You'll regret this," she spat. "All of you, I'll sue every last one of you. I'll drag this entire neighborhood into court." I stepped forward, finally closing the gap between us. My shadow stretched across her, heavy and unmoving. "Go ahead," I said. "File your lawsuits, but before you do, maybe check your HOA account balance." Her face faltered, confusion flashing across her features. "What are you talking about?" I pulled my phone from my pocket, swiped once, and held the screen up for everyone to see. "Turns out while I was away, you stopped paying your own HOA dues. Funny thing is, the board sent me the arrears notice by mistake." The screen glowed with her name, her overdue balance, the very evidence she thought she could bury. Karen staggered back like I'd just ripped the ground from under her. Her son's jaw dropped. "Mom, you didn't pay." His voice was small, but the betrayal in it was heavy. Her lips parted, but no words came. For once she had nothing, just silence. The older officer stepped forward, pulling his cuffs free with a sound that cracked the still air. "That's enough, ma'am, you're coming with us." The click of steel echoed through the block as the cuffs locked around her wrists. For a split second, I thought it was over. Justice had finally caught up. But then something happened that none of us expected. As the officers tried to guide her toward the cruiser, her son didn't follow. He stayed rooted to the porch, his face pale, his body rigid. His eyes darted toward me, then back to his mother, and then he blurted it out. "Wait, I'm not going with hers." The air froze. Karen whipped around, her whole body jerking like she'd been struck. "What did you just say?" The boy's voice trembled, but there was steel underneath. I can't keep covering for you. You dragged me into this mess. You told me we had the right to stay here. You lied to me, to everyone." Karen's face flushed red, her words stumbling out jagged and broken. "I did this for you so you'd have a place, so you wouldn't." "No," his voice cracked, but it rang out like thunder. "You didn't do this for me, you did it for yourself, you just wanted control." The silence that followed was deafening. Even the younger cop looked away, uncomfortable, as if he'd accidentally stumbled into something too raw to watch. My wife studied the boy, her expression unreadable. "Son, do you have something you want to tell us?" His shoulders slumped. He looked at me, shame heavy in his eyes. "Yeah, I didn't want to stay here. Mom made me. She said nobody would ever find out. I'm sorry for what she did to your house. I knew it wasn't right." Karen lunged forward, but the officers held her back. "Don't you dare turn on me, I'm your mother," she shrieked, her voice breaking under the weight of her crumbling authority. But the boy stepped away, his hands trembling but his voice steady. "Not today, I'm done being your excuse." I watched him stunned. There was fear in his eyes, yes, but there was something else too, relief, like a prisoner finally stepping into sunlight. For the first time that day, it wasn't just me and my wife standing against Karen. It was her own family too. The officers tugged her toward the cruiser, her voice rising into a last desperate scream. "This isn't over, I'll get out, and when I do, you'll regret ever crossing me." I met her eyes one last time, steady, cold. "Karen, the only one who's going to regret anything here is you." The cruiser door slammed, cutting off her voice. And just like that, the street felt lighter. The neighbors who had been peeking from their windows melted back into their homes. The cops started filing their reports. My wife exhaled, her shoulders relaxing for the first time since she'd arrived. But my house, my home, still looked wrecked. The pizza boxes, the blankets, the chaos inside was a reminder that someone had lived in my space without me. Her son stood awkwardly at the edge of the driveway, gravel crunching under his sneakers as he shifted his weight. He wouldn't look me in the eye at first, then finally he spoke. I know I don't deserve it, but thank you for not letting her get away with it. She's been like this my whole life." I studied him for a long moment. He wasn't innocent. But he wasn't the villain either, just a kid dragged too deep into his mother's madness. "You've got a chance to be different," I said quietly. "Don't waste it." He nodded, eyes glassy, and turned down the street, walking away alone. For the first time, he wasn't hiding behind her shadow. My wife slipped her arm through mine, her voice softer now. "You all right?" I looked back at the wreckage inside, the hollow reminder of invasion. Then I looked at her, at the badge gleaming on her chest, at the steady strength in her eyes. Yeah, I said, finally breathing. Because this is still our home, and nobody, no fake notices, no Karen with a power trip can take that from us. The sun dipped lower, painting the lake gold. For the first time since I'd stepped onto that porch, I exhaled. Justice isn't always clean, but today it was sure as hell satisfying. The street looked calm again, but calm can be deceiving. The cruiser had driven away, Karen's furious voice fading into nothing but memory, yet I knew this wasn't the end. People like her didn't just vanish quietly into the night. They schemed, they whispered, they spread poison until someone else carried their torch. As my wife spoke with the officers, wrapping up their report, I caught sight of blinds snapping shut. Neighbors who had been peering out during the chaos disappeared like kids caught eavesdropping, and I knew what tomorrow would bring: rumors. I carried my bag inside, the hinges groaning like they'd aged years in my absence. The air hit me, stale pizza, soda spilled into the carpet, faint traces of cologne that wasn't mine. I stood still for a moment, just letting the violation sink in. A home isn't just walls, it's safety, it's belonging, and both had been shattered. My wife stepped in behind me. The sound of her boots against the ruined floor felt grounding, but her eyes softened when she looked at me. "We'll fix it," she said simply, as though she could read my mind. But fixing a house was one thing, fixing trust was another. That night, the neighborhood was quieter than usual. No kids playing, no dogs barking, just the hum of streetlights and the occasional creak of branches in the wind. The silence wasn't peace, it was watchfulness, everyone waiting to see what would happen next. I barely slept. By morning, word had spread. The first encounter came when I stepped outside to grab the mail. The gate creaked loud as ever, the metal scraping against rust, a sound Karen had once demanded I oiled to keep the neighborhood aesthetic. Ironic. A neighbor across the street, Mr. Ellis, stood watering his lawn. His eyes darted up at me, lingered, then quickly dropped back to his grass, but not before I caught the awkward half-smile he tried to mask. "Morning," I called. He hesitated, then muttered, "Morning," before turning his back, hose still running over the same patch of lawn. I could feel it, the unease, the judgment, the curiosity. By midday, I got the first call, HOA board number flashing across my phone. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Hello." A crisp female voice crackled through. "This is Mrs. Dobson, acting president of the HOA board. We're aware of last night's events." I leaned against the porch post, the wood warm from the afternoon sun. "You mean when one of your board members broke into my home and tried to steal it?" Silence, just static on the line, then measured words. "We'd like to schedule a meeting to clarify the situation." "Clarify," I repeated, disbelief dripping from my voice. "She forged documents, filed a false report, had her son squatting in my living room. What exactly needs clarifying?" Mrs. Dobson cleared her throat. "You have to understand, Karen has been a part of this community for years. She's respected. We don't want this to spiral into bad press for the neighborhood." There it was, the real fear, not justice, not right and wrong, reputation. I let the silence hang long enough that she started to fidget on the other end. "Fine," I said at last. "Set the meeting, I'll be there." When I hung up, my wife raised an eyebrow. "You trust them?" "No," I admitted, "but I want to see how far they'll go to protect her." The meeting was set for the next evening. Walking into that clubhouse felt like stepping into enemy territory. The room smelled of disinfectant and lemon air freshener, the kind they used to mask mold. A long polished table stretched down the middle, lined with mismatched chairs. At the far end sat the board members, stiff-backed, papers stacked neatly in front of them like they were preparing for trial. And in a ways they were. Mrs. Dobson offered a tight smile. "Thank you for coming, we want to make this civil." I sat, the chair creaking under me. Civil would have been not letting one of your own hijack my home. A man on the left, tall, wiry, eyes sharp, leaned forward. "You have to understand, Karen acted out of community concern. She believed you abandoned the property." "She believed what she wanted to believe," I shot back. "And she dragged your HOA name into it, so maybe ask yourselves why she thought she could." Murmurs rippled through them, they didn't like hearing it out loud. Mrs. Dobson folded her hands. "We understand your frustration, truly, but legally this could get complicated. Charges against Karen reflect poorly on the HOA as a whole. We'd like to propose mediation." I laughed, couldn't help it. The sound echoed in the sterile room, bouncing off the beige walls. Mediation, after she forged eviction notices, after she called the cops on me in my own driveway. Another board member piped up, nervously adjusting his glasses. What we mean is perhaps there's a way to handle this without involving the courts. Keep it internal. Internal meaning buried, meaning silenced. I leaned forward, hands flat on the table. Let me make something clear. My house is not a chess piece in your little HOA power games. She crossed the line, and if you think I'm going to let it slide just so your newsletter doesn't look bad, you've got another thing coming. Silence, heavy, awkward. The tick of the clock on the wall was the only sound for a few seconds. Finally, Mrs. Dobson sighed. We'll review this internally. Thank you for your time. Dismissed just like that. As I walked out, the fluorescent lights flickered above me. The air felt colder than outside, the kind of chill that doesn't come from temperature but from being surrounded by people who'd rather protect themselves than the truth. My wife was waiting in the car, engine running. I slid into the passenger seat, jaw tight. They're going to try to cover it, I said. She didn't even look surprised. Of course they are, but the question is, are you going to let them? I stared out the window, the neighborhood passing slowly as we drove home. Houses lined neatly, lawns trimmed, paint fresh, the picture of perfection on the outside, but behind closed doors, cracks, secrets, power games. And now, Karen's downfall wasn't just hers. It was about to expose the rot that the HOA had tried to hide for years. And whether they liked it or not, I wasn't done, not even close. The days after that meeting were colder than I expected. Not the weather, though the mornings did carry that sharp bite of autumn, but the people. Neighbors I once waved to barely nodded anymore. Some crossed the street when they saw me coming. Others stood in little clusters at the end of driveways, conversations falling silent the second I walked by. It was as if Karen's absence hadn't solved anything. It had only shifted the weight. She wasn't here to glare from her porch anymore, but her shadow still lingered over every conversation, every sideways glance. I felt it most when I walked past the Hendersons' house. Their kids used to play basketball in the cul-de-sac. Now the bouncing stopped the second they saw me, the ball tucked under an arm as they hurried inside. Curtains swayed as if someone had just let them drop. It didn't take long for the first whisper to reach me. I was stepping out to toss trash into the bin one evening when Mrs. Cruz, an older woman 2 doors down, shuffled by with her little terrier tugging at the leash. She hesitated, glanced around like she was checking the street for spies, then leaned closer. Don't take it personal, she murmured. People talk, but they're scared. Karen had friends on that board, more than you think. I frowned, scared of what? She's gone, she's facing charges. Mrs. Cruz gave me a sad little smile, the kind you give someone who doesn't know the whole picture yet. Gone, yes. Finished? No, the board protects its own, always has. They'll twist it if they can. And some folks around here, they'd rather keep their peace than admit they were wrong. Her dog yanked her forward before I could reply. She didn't look back. That night, I sat on the porch alone. The gate creaked each time the wind blew like it was mocking me. My wife had gone back on shift, and for the first time since the chaos, I felt the weight pressing down. This wasn't just about a Karen with a forged notice. This was about a system that had given her the confidence to believe she could. The next morning, I got proof. A letter slid under my door, no envelope, no signature, just 1 page. Drop the charges, this community doesn't need more drama. If you fight the HOA, you'll regret it. No name, no return address, just that. I read it 3 times, my hand tightening on the paper until it crumpled. Regret it. That was the game now, intimidation, silence through fear. But fear cuts both ways. Later that afternoon, as I walked toward the mailbox, I caught sight of someone waiting near the corner, Karen's son. Hoodie pulled over his head, shoulders hunched, hands jammed into his pockets. For a second, I thought he'd come to pick up where his mother left off. But when he saw me, he straightened nervously and lifted a hand in a half wave. I just wanted to apologize again, he mumbled when I approached. His voice cracked like he hadn't decided if he should be standing there at all. You already did, I said. My tone wasn't harsh, but it wasn't soft either. He swallowed hard. I know, but I've been hearing stuff, neighbors saying you shouldn't be here, that my mom was right. His eyes darted up, then away. She was, I know that now, but people around here, they believe what they want to believe. The honesty in his voice surprised me. He was still just a kid, but he was caught in something bigger than he could carry. You don't have to answer for her, I told him, not anymore. He nodded slowly, but the guilt didn't leave his eyes. When he walked away, I realized something important. Not everyone in this neighborhood hated me. Some were just trapped in Karen's orbit, too scared to step out. And scared people do dangerous things. That week, strange little inconveniences started stacking up. Trash cans knocked over in the night, a scratch down the side of my car that hadn't been there before, flyers from the HOA stuffed into my mailbox warning about violations that didn't exist, grass too long, fence needing paint, mailbox non-compliant. It was petty, it was obvious, but it was also calculated. They wanted me rattled, they wanted me gone. One night around 10 p.m., I heard it, the faint crunch of gravel outside. I killed the lights, stepped quietly to the window, and peeked out. Two figures standing in the dark across the street smoking. Their silhouettes were familiar, men from the HOA meetings, I realized, not here by accident, watching. I felt my chest tight and anger boiling, but instead of storming out, I waited, watched, let them think I hadn't noticed. When they finally flicked their cigarettes into the gutter and walked off, I exhaled slowly. This wasn't paranoia anymore, this was pressure. I thought of the letter, if you fight the HOA, you'll regret it. I thought of the neighbors who turned away, of the boy who wanted out of his mother's shadow but couldn't escape her ghost. And I realized, Karen might be sitting in a cell somewhere, but her influence was alive and well. This fight wasn't over, it had only changed shape. That night before bed, my wife placed a hand on my shoulder. They're pushing you, she said softly, trying to make you crack. I looked at her, at the badge she wore with quiet dignity, and shook my head. No, they want me silent, but I've been silent long enough. And in the stillness of that house, the house I'd fought to protect, I made a decision. If they thought Karen was the worst mistake of their lives, they hadn't seen anything yet. It started small, notices in the mailbox, slipped in at odd hours, always unsigned. Violation, your lawn exceeds HOA standards. Violation, fence paint chipped and unapproved color. Violation, noise disturbance reported at 11:30 p.m. Noise disturbance at 11:30, I was asleep by 10. The notices piled up like paper cuts, each one sharp, meaningless on its own, but together they stung deep. They weren't rules, they were weapons. By the third week, I had a stack an inch thick, my patience was thinner. Neighbors began choosing sides. Some nodded to me in quiet solidarity, slipping a glance toward the HOA office like they wanted to say more but didn't dare. Others looked through me as if I didn't exist. Silence became its own language, and the message was clear: you don't belong here. The mailbox told me everything. Flyers shoved inside, bold red letters screaming HOA community meeting, emergency vote. That word, vote. I knew what it meant, they were coming for me officially now. The night of the meeting, the clubhouse parking lot overflowed. Cars lined the street, neighbors whispering as they walked in. Their shoes crunched gravel, their voices hushed when I stepped out of my truck. I felt the heat of their stares burning into my back as I pushed through the double doors. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed, harsh and unforgiving. Folding chairs filled the hall, every seat occupied, the air thick with anticipation. At the front, the HOA board sat like a tribunal, faces tight, papers neatly stacked. Mrs. Dobson, the acting president, adjusted her glasses and tapped the mic. Order, she said, though the room was already silent. We're here to address ongoing issues surrounding Mr. Walker's property. My property, my home, the word hung in the air like a challenge. She cleared her throat. Complaints have been filed, numerous complaints. We must consider whether his presence continues to serve the best interest of this community. A murmur rippled through the crowd. I heard the word outsider. Someone hissed troublemaker. I stood slowly, the chair legs screeching against the floor. Best interest of the community? My voice carried, sharp but steady. You mean best interest of the board? Gasps scattered through the crowd. Mrs. Dobson's face tightened. Mr. Walker, please. No, I cut in. Let's be honest, this isn't about lawns or fences. This is about Karen, about how she thought she could take what wasn't hers because this board made her believe she could. And now instead of fixing it, you're circling the wagons. A man in the second row stood, red in the face. Karen was trying to protect us. You left, you abandoned your house. I turned to him, voice rising. I left for 2 weeks, and I came home to find strangers in my living room, strangers wearing my clothes, eating off my table, and you call that protection? The room erupted, voices shouting, chairs scraping. Half the neighbors arguing, the other half whispering nervously, caught in the storm. Mrs. Dobson banged her gavel, voice strained. Enough, this is a formal hearing, not a circus. I waited for the noise to die down, then spoke again, quieter now, each word deliberate. Karen isn't the story here. She's gone, facing charges. The real story is this board. How many of you knew what she was doing? How many of you signed off on those fake notices? How many of you sent men to stand on my street at night thinking I wouldn't notice? Silence heavy, faces shifted uncomfortably. One of the board members, a balding man with nervous hands, blurted out, "That's a lie." I pulled out my phone, tapped the screen, and held it up. A grainy photo appeared, two figures standing across from my house at midnight, cigarettes glowing in the dark. Funny, doesn't look like a lie to me. Gasps swept the room, the balding man's face went pale. I pressed on, "You wanted me scared, you wanted me gone, and now you're parading complaints about grass height to cover the truth. But here's the thing," I leaned forward, my voice dropping into a steady growl. "You picked the wrong house and the wrong man." My wife in uniform stepped from the back of the room. Her boots echoed against the tile, her badge gleaming under the fluorescent lights. She didn't say a word, she didn't have to. The room shifted instantly, the board stiffening, the whispers snapping into silence. Mrs. Dobson's hands trembled as she shuffled her papers. "We will have to reschedule this vote." I smirked, "Reschedule all you want, I'm not going anywhere." The meeting ended in chaos. Some neighbors hurried out, eyes down. Others lingered, casting me cautious nods, small sparks of support hidden behind their fear. But the damage was done. The board had tried to stage an ambush, and instead they'd exposed themselves. That night, as I walked home under the dim streetlights, I felt the weight lift slightly, not gone, but lighter. Because I knew something now. Karen wasn't the only enemy. The HOA itself was rotten, and if they thought this was over, they were about to learn a lesson Karen never did. Sometimes, the man you try to push out is the one who digs his heels in the deepest. After that meeting, the HOA stopped pretending. The violation letters didn't come folded anymore. They came taped to my front door in bold red ink. "Final warning, penalties will apply." The wording grew harsher, the threats less subtle. One morning, I stepped outside to find a bright orange sticker slapped across my garage door, "Property under review." The glue was thick, leaving a stain when I peeled it off. Neighbors walked by, pretending not to notice, but their eyes said everything. To them, I wasn't just the guy who stood up to Karen anymore, I was radioactive. By the end of the week, another notice arrived. This one wasn't fake. It bore the HOA seal, the board's signatures lined across the bottom. Mandatory fine, $2,500 for repeated violations. Violations I hadn't committed. I sat at my kitchen table staring at the paper, the numbers blurring, my hands tightening until the edges curled. It wasn't about the money, it was the principle. They wanted me broke, beaten, gone. That night I heard it again, the sound of gravel crunching outside. I stepped quietly to the window and saw headlights idling at the corner, a car parked too long, engine low and steady, watching. When I opened the door, the car pulled away, taillights vanishing into the dark. The message was clear, this wasn't about community anymore, this was war. The next HOA meeting wasn't an ambush, it was a trial. The clubhouse was packed tighter than before, the air heavier, the stares colder. Mrs. Dobson sat at the head of the table, her expression calm in that way only someone hiding panic could pull off. "Mr. Walker," she said, her voice carrying like a rehearsed script, "due to repeated noncompliance and disruptive behavior, the board will be voting on your removal from this community." I laughed, bitter and sharp. "Removal, you don't own this house, you don't own me." Her lips pressed thin. "The board reserves the right to protect the harmony of the neighborhood if residents believe your presence is detrimental." "Detrimental?" I barked. "You mean because I refused to let Karen steal my house, because I exposed your board's little games?" The murmurs started again, some nodding, some shaking heads, the room fracturing down invisible lines. Then a voice rose from the back. It was Mrs. Cruz, the same woman who had whispered warnings to me days earlier. She stood slowly, her voice trembling but clear. "Enough, he's right. This isn't about lawns or fences. This is about power, and we all know it." Gasps rippled, all eyes turned to her. She went on, "How many of us have been fined for nonsense? How many of us bit our tongues because we were scared of retaliation? Karen just went too far, and now they want to bury the mess." A hush fell. For the first time, the board wasn't in complete control. Mrs. Dobson's face tightened, her knuckles white against the table. "Mrs. Cruz, please." But Cruz cut her off. "No, I'm done being quiet." The room erupted, voices overlapping, neighbors shouting over one another. Some backed me, angry now, emboldened by Cruz. Others defended the board, fear and loyalty tangled together. The divide was open, raw, impossible to hide. I raised my voice over the chaos. You can vote all you want, but here's the truth: you don't have the power to evict me. This house is mine. And if you think threats, fines, or late-night intimidation will change that, you don't know me at all. My wife stepped forward again, uniform sharp, badge glinting under the fluorescent lights. She didn't have to speak. Her presence alone was enough to silence half the room. But she did speak. For weeks, I've watched this board abuse its authority. I've seen intimidation, harassment, even trespassing. You've crossed every line you claim to protect. And if this continues, she leaned forward, her voice dropping to a blade's edge, it won't just be an HOA issue anymore, it will be a criminal one. The board sat frozen. Even Mrs. Dobson's composure cracked, her throat bobbing as she swallowed. The meeting ended without a vote. They hadn't expected resistance, not like that. But leaving the clubhouse, I knew the fight wasn't over. If anything, it had only escalated. Back home, the air felt heavier, thicker. I couldn't shake the sense of being watched. And I was right. 2 nights later, at 3 a.m., I woke to the sound of metal clanging. I bolted upright, heart hammering, ears straining in the silence. Then there it was again, a faint scrape near the back gate. I grabbed the flashlight, moved quietly through the house, each floorboard groaning under my weight. My hand hovered near the baseball bat propped by the door. When I pushed open the back door, the cold air hit me. The gate stood ajar, the lock snapped, hanging uselessly. And beyond it, footprints, fresh in the dirt, leading toward the lake. My light swept the yard, but whoever it was had vanished into the night. I stood there in the silence, the lake water lapping faintly, my breath fogging in the cold air. This wasn't vandalism anymore. This was trespassing. And deep down, I knew it wasn't random, it was deliberate. It was the board or those still loyal to Karen sending a message: we can reach you anytime. I closed the gate, secured it with a chain, and went back inside. My wife was awake now, her eyes sharp, her hand already on the phone. They just made a mistake, I said quietly, setting the bat back down. Why? She asked. Because now it's not just suspicion, it's proof. And proof, I let the word hang heavy in the dark, is the one thing they can't twist. I looked out at the lake one more time, the water shimmering under the moonlight. The war with Karen had been personal. But the war with the HOA, that was about to turn public. The footprints haunted me for days. I kept seeing them in my mind, the fresh impressions in the dirt, the open gate, the night air cold against my skin. Someone had been in my yard, feet from my back door, bold enough to break a lock and walk where they didn't belong. And that was the moment I realized something had shifted. This wasn't about fines anymore. It wasn't about fake notices or even about Karen. It was about control. The HOA had declared war and they weren't hiding it anymore. But here's the thing about pushing someone too far: you teach them how to fight back harder. I started documenting everything. Photos of the broken lock, videos of the men loitering across the street at night, a binder of every bogus violation, each page timestamped, stacked in order. I called a lawyer, not just any lawyer, a real estate attorney who had gone toe-to-toe with HOA boards before, the kind who knew exactly where they buried their skeletons. When I slid the binder across his desk, he flipped through the pages, eyebrows rising higher with each turn. This, he said finally, tapping the pile, isn't just harassment. It's a pattern, and if we push this into court, they'll fold before they let it see daylight. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't allowed myself to feel: hope. The next HOA meeting was their last stand. The clubhouse was crowded again, but this time the energy was different. No whispers, no smirks, just tension. The board sat at the front, but their posture was stiff, their eyes darting. They knew something was coming. Mrs. Dobson cleared her throat, voice thin. This meeting has been called to address escalating conflicts between Mr. Walker and the community. Conflicts, I cut in, my voice sharp enough to make half the room flinch. You mean harassment, intimidation, trespassing? Gasps, chairs creaked as neighbors leaned forward. I pulled out the binder, set it on the table with a thud that echoed through the hall. Every notice, every false violation, photos of your members standing outside my house at midnight, and proof of a break-in at my back gate. This isn't hearsay, this is evidence. Mrs. Dobson's face drained of color. She glanced at the others, but no one came to her rescue. And here's the best part, I continued, my voice steady now, every word deliberate. This isn't staying in this room. My attorney has copies, law enforcement has copies. If one more notice shows up in my mailbox, if one more car parks outside my house at night, if one more lock is broken, this entire board will answer in court. The silence was absolute. You could hear the hum of the lights, the scratch of a pen falling from someone's hand. Then something I didn't expect. A neighbor stood, not Mrs. Cruz this time, but Mr. Ellis, the same man who had avoided eye contact while watering his lawn weeks earlier. His voice was shaky, but it carried. He's telling the truth, I've seen it. I saw the men standing outside his house at night. Murmurs rippled through the room. Another neighbor stood, then another. A quiet rebellion building, voices that had been silent too long finally finding air. This board has gone too far. They fine me for painting my shutters. They threatened to lien my house over a mailbox. The board tried to shout over the noise, but it was useless. The room had turned. And for the first time, I saw something in their eyes, fear. Because control only works as long as people believe in it, and in that moment, the belief shattered. The meeting dissolved into chaos, neighbors demanding change, voices overlapping. Mrs. Dobson banged her gavel until her arm shook, but the sound was drowned out. When I walked out of that room, the night air felt different, lighter. But I knew better than to think it was over. The board didn't call again, no more notices showed up in my mailbox. The car that had lingered at the corner never returned. For weeks, the silence felt strange, uneasy, like the calm after a storm when you're waiting to see what damage is left behind. And then the news came. Karen had been officially removed from the HOA board. Mrs. Dobson, too, the balding man resigned for health reasons. The board fractured, and with it, their stranglehold on the neighborhood. Neighbors began speaking to me again, not all, but enough. The Henderson kids were back in the cul-de-sac, basketball thumping against the pavement. Mrs. Cruz stopped by with cookies, her way of saying thank you without saying the words. Even Mr. Ellis gave me a nod one evening, genuine this time, not forced. But the house still bore scars, scratches down the car, the stain from the sticker on the garage, the lingering smell of someone else's pizza in my living room. Those things fade, but the memory doesn't. One evening, as the sun dipped low over the lake, I sat on the porch with my wife. The gate creaked in the breeze, the sound familiar now, almost comforting in its honesty. She leaned her head against my shoulder, her voice soft. You think it's finally over? I looked out at the water, golden under the fading light. With Karen's, maybe, with the HOA, I paused, the weight of it heavy in my chest. There's always another battle waiting, but at least now they know I won't back down. She smiled faintly, her hand finding mine. And in that moment, I realized something. This wasn't just about a house. It wasn't about Karen or fines or even the board. It was about standing firm when someone tries to take what's yours, about refusing to let fear dictate where you belong. Sometimes the strongest fight isn't loud. It's the quiet act of not moving, not bending, not breaking. As the last light slipped across the lake, I let out a breath I hadn't known I was holding. The neighborhood would go on, rules would change, faces would shift, power would move from one hand to another. That's the way of things. But me, I was still here. And no Karen, no board, no threat would ever change that. Every HOA has a story on HOA headaches. You'll hear the ones they tried to bury. Subscribe today.